You have something to bring into the world that no one else can bring in. And so if you fail in that duty, then you deprive the world of that. And maybe you shouldn't do that. Like maybe everything's lesser if you do that. And you don't know how much lesser, because the world is also constituted in a very strange way. Dostoevsky said that we're not only responsible for what we do, but for what everyone else does, which is truly an insane thing to say, but also in some sense fundamentally true. I don't know how it is that each of us can bear the burden of the world on our shoulders singularly, because I can't really comprehend how things can be structured in that manner, but I do believe nonetheless that it is the case, and so that if you forswear your responsibility to the highest good, then you tear something out of the fabric of being that is of inestimable value. And I do believe you will pay for that if you do it, and I would suggest that you don't pay that price, because it will not be pleasant. That's definitely hell. And if you don't think hell is real, you haven't thought about it enough. It isn't a matter of other people believing foolish things. It's a matter of you being so naive and so well protected that you have no idea how the world is constituted. I had lots of clients and students who were chaotic in their orientation to life. They didn't know what to do, and they didn't know what to do about not knowing what to do. It's like, I don't know what to do with my life, and I don't know what to do about my ignorance. And my reaction to that, in some sense, wasn't exactly the reaction of a clinician, because not a typical clinician, because typical clinicians are liberal Protestant in their fundamental orientation, and they tend to think of psychological development as something like self-actualization, right? It's really a self-development process. But that wasn't my observation, partly influenced by the developmental psychologist Jean Piaget. I had a more communitarian view of human development than that, and my observation was that most people find the cardinal meanings in their life not as a consequence of the development of their self, whatever that is, but in service to other people, in the adoption of responsibility. Because you're told, be responsible, and it's a finger-wagging thing again, that if you were a good person, you be responsible, you do your duty. But no one ever says, well, because that's where you find the abiding meaning in your life, and you need that meaning to sustain you through suffering. And that's definitely the case. I was very ill for a number of years, and a lot of what got me through that wasn't my own special nature, let's say, but the support of my family and the support of my friends and the support of the broader community made a huge difference, not only psychologically, because I knew people were supporting me, but also practically. You build yourself a community. You sacrifice yourself in the service of other people, not so much because you should, although you should, but because that is where meaning is to be found, and you need a deep meaning to sustain you through tragedy. That's the arc. And you find that deep meaning, and there's a notion that it's better to give than to receive, and it sounds like a Hallmark greeting card in some sense. And people are cynical about that too. Well, yeah, you say that because you should be good and think that. But if you watch yourself, you'll see that it's true, because one of the things that's been really pronounced element in my life is that, people thank me from time to time for things that I've done or said. And there isn't a better experience than that, that you put something out that's actually a manifestation of what you truly believe, and the consequence of that is part of the redemptive process for someone else. There is nothing that's better than that. Zero, nothing. In fact, I don't think there's anything that's even in the same conceptual universe of that in terms of its intrinsically rewarding properties. There's nothing better than to have people, perhaps particularly people you've never met, tell you that what you have been doing has had a salutary effect on their lives. And so that's a hell of a fine thing to aim for. And why not aim for it, because you could do it. If you put, I wouldn't even say necessarily that you put other people first, because I think that's a mistake, but I do think it's the case that you treat other people in the manner that you would wish to be treated if you were treating yourself properly. And that's also a sophisticated thing, right? To learn to treat yourself properly. Because that doesn't mean you get to fulfill every momentary whim, because that's what you do when you're 2, and 2-year-olds can't live without their parents. You have to be wise enough to govern your current behavior in light of the future. And that's really what it means to be an adult. It's what it means to forestall gratification and to attain the responsibility of an adult. And the reason that you should do that, because you should, is because it's actually better, in all ways. It's a panacea for suffering to adopt that responsibility. Knock and the door will open, ask and you will receive, seek and you will find. And people think, well, no way, the world's not constituted like that. It's like, it goes back to the idea of aim. If you don't aim at it, you're not going to hit it. And it might also go back to a question about what do you mean by ask and what do you mean by want? Because it isn't just some casual request. Asking means something like this: I am willing to give up everything that I'm doing wrong so that I can put things right. If I could know what right was. And that's you're on your knees when you say that, man. And maybe if you're on your knees, you get the answer. And so that's worth thinking about. So, if you knock and you wanted to walk through and you asked and you wanted to learn, and you sought because you wanted to find, maybe you would receive and be answered and find. But not without aim. I swore that I would stop lying. I said, I'm going to try not to say anything I know to be untrue. That doesn't mean I swore to tell the truth, because truth, that's hard. But you can consciously stop lying when you know you're lying. You can stop doing that. And that has been revolutionary for me. And one of the things I've really realized in recent years, and this is very much worth knowing, is that many times when people speak to each other, they have an agenda in mind. You want something from someone. Maybe you want a job and you want to craft your image to get the job, right? So you say what you need to say to get what you think you need. The problem with that is, what do you know about what you need? You're so accurate about that, are you? And you think you know what you need exactly, and so you're going to falsify your utterances to bring about the desired end. And you're going to use the other person as a target of your manipulation. Well, that's like you write an essay because that's what the professor wants to hear. It's like you don't do that, because you don't falsify your words, because hypothetically they're divine, and the whole stability of the state rests on them, hypothetically, and maybe really too. And so you don't do that. And so instead you strive to tell the truth, and maybe that's an aim too. And then it's an adventure, because I'll tell you one thing: if you tell the truth, you have no idea what's going to happen to you. Because you have to let go of that. It's like, I'm going to say what I think, and then what I'm going to assume, faith, I'm going to assume that whatever happens, if I am telling the truth, is the best thing that could happen. Because the truth brings about what is best. And even if it looks hard for me, because it might be, because people take the easy way out often when they lie, even if it looks bad for me, that doesn't mean it's bad. It just means I don't see the whole picture. And if you believe that the truth will set you free, and that there is such a thing as the truth, and that the truth is redemptive, then you're pretty much stuck with that conclusion. But one of the remarkable things about that, and this really is worth knowing, is that if you do that, you will have your adventure. Right? That's the Abrahamic adventure, the call from God that justifies your life because of the excitement of what you're doing. And the truth does that. And then if it's the truth, man, it's your adventure. Because what bloody adventure are you having if you tell someone else's story? It's not yours. And maybe if it's not yours, it's not good enough for you. And then you suffer, and then you're bitter, and then you're cruel, and then you're resentful. That's not good, or you get arrogant. So you break up your life, into practicalities, your career, your education, your intimate relationship, your marriage, your friendship. Hopefully your intimate relationship and your marriage are the same thing. Your use of time outside work, your civic duty, and you develop an image for yourself, a vision for yourself on all those fronts, and assume that you can have, with the proper sacrifices, what you need and want. And then I'll say something interesting about that, because that's the pursuit of goods in a practical way, right? And what's valuable in a practical way, an implementable way. And you pick those pathways and you dedicate yourself to their optimization along any of those axes. And then you learn to optimize an aim. And then you see, once you've learned to optimize an aim across a set of goods, you start to aim at what unites those goods. Because that's what makes goods good. It's whatever is common across a set of goods. That's the highest good or a higher good. And so by practicing any good in any rigorous sense and making the proper sacrifices in that direction, you simultaneously learn to approach the good that is the sum or the essence of all those proximal goods. And freest societies that we have, that the world's ever known, the more successful societies, are predicated on precisely that idea as an unshakable foundation, a self-evident truth in the case of your country. And so it might be true, and if it is true, and if that is real, then why in the world would you ever attempt to do anything else? And it's kind of earth-shattering in some sense to take this with real seriousness, you know. It's all very frightening. If you're not afraid of that vision, you know, and what it implies for you and your soul, then you didn't understand it. But it's also an unbelievably, endlessly promising vision of what your life could be. And you know, you might think, well, I need a life so rich that I can justify its suffering. And that's really asking for something, because there's no shortage of suffering in life. And no one thinks their own suffering isn't real. And maybe there's a possibility that there's some aim that's so high that the attempt alone to move in that direction is of sufficient value to act as a panacea for the suffering. And so you could say at the end of your life, oh my God, that was so hard. It was worth it. And so that's the choice you make at the crossroad.